to the side.
For City Center of Jackson Foundation.
The very last question.
The very last question before the sidewalk.
Add one. It's just a summary calculation. No, this has 0708 and the deposition.
Yeah, where he answered 0708.
Right. And that's what the EA was. But in the deposition.
This is the sidebar.
That is the sidebar.
Right. All right. So,
This,
I don't want the jury to hear the sidebar, so let's just, I'll pick up where I am. Now, in your deposition, you clearly testified that your opinion was as to the period 2005 to 2007. Isn't that right?
Correct.
All right. And in fact, let me direct your attention to page 15, line 15. You have your deposition?
that's already, that's who it disappeared.
But it doesn't have the, oh, it's got one. No, it's got
I got some.
I think we had the exhibits in the deposition.
No, we were looking.
I think you took them off the deposition.
I don't have a deposition.
Oh.
I got the exhibit.
May I approach just to help clarify what back into what this is?
Two divider tabs. I have two.
Yes. Okay, great. You do have. Put this back together.
This is what
Mr. Week gave you this?
these questions.
Oh, okay. Well, let's save it. I think we're missing some pages. I think we can start with this. Just get a clip. You have a clip?
I got a clip.
All right. I think we got your deposition back together. If it turns out you're missing any pages, let me know. But I'm directing your attention to page 15, line 15. Let me know when you found it.
I got it.
Okay. Question. Now, you were called upon to render certain opinions in this case. Is that correct? Answer. Opinion to value. Question. Did you reach an opinion of value in this case? Answer. Yes, I have. Question. And what opinion did you reach? Answer. I came up with two separate values one being in the area of 2005 to 2007, and that came in at $2,997,450. Question, and then what was your second opinion? Answer, the second opinion would be basically 2012, let's say, and that came in at $2,274,741. All right. Was that your testimony in your deposition?
Yes,
And that was correct at the time?
at the time.
Have you changed your testimony to, for the first part of the opinion, to get into the 2008 time period?
When I was being deposed, the attorney told me the one lease didn't start till 2008.
So it should be excluded from the
So-
valuation for 2005 to 2007, isn't that right?
And I said that I was doing opinion of value on rents that were to be collected. I did not collect them, I had nothing to do with collection of them. So I could only go by what the leases said they were, and that's what I based my opinion on. And when they moved in, like I told him, when he brought that up, I said, they're not going to all move in on the same date, and if one moved in on 2008, I'm still going to value it on the amount of payments that the leases would be had they moved all in one day, even though we all know they don't move in one day.
All right, now you're familiar with opinion to value letters. You do them, isn't that right?
Correct.
Is it appropriate to take a 2008 lease for valuing the property on a lease capitalization analysis for the period of 2005 to 2007?
What I'm going to say to that is that if you state that you want it just on what's being paid is one thing. It was stated to be on what the leases were, and it's like the bank's appraiser giving rents. He doesn't know when they're going to move in, and he's saying the value's worth this much. It's the same thing.
But for the period 2005 to 2007, who cares if they move in 2008? Isn't that right? It doesn't affect the value as of 2007.
The value, again, and I'm not being argumentative, what I'm saying is I was given leases and said, what's the value based on the leases, not when they moved in. Okay? So I'm doing it on what was given to me as far as leases. The appraiser for the bank says they're going to lease it for this much. He gave a value. He didn't know if they were going to move in.
Is it your testimony as an expert that it doesn't matter when people move in, or whether the leases are binding, or whether they paid any rent at all? The only thing that matters is if there is a lease at some point in time.
No way.
Okay. Tell me why that's not correct.
Because, again, I'm stating again, the leases were given to me, and I did see the tenants when I visited the site, that on the first floor, there was the bar restaurant, and I did not have move-in dates. So I was given, again, opinion of value that the leases, the people were there, the leases are there, and I don't have the move-in dates.
When were you engaged in this matter?
3 months, 4 months ago, I'm not sure.
3 or 4 months ago. And your site visit that you're describing was after that date.
Yeah.
So you don't know if Z Grill was in the space in 2005, 2006, or 2007, do you?
No.
Well, I'm going to ask you to assume that they were not. Let's assume that they moved in 2008. We looked at the general ledger and there were no rent payments. If they were not in that space in 2007, is it appropriate to use their lease for evaluation for 2005 through 2007?
The appraiser gave a value that they were all going to be moved in, didn't he?
Okay. I'm asking you. You're not an appraiser.
That's right. And I'm saying, again, I'm just going to say that I was given leases, and I was not there in 05, 06, and so I don't know who moved in. I gave a value on leases being active and in force and being collected.
As of what date?
as of the date of the leases, or if they were extended to a move-in date. I wasn't,
If somebody moves in and signs a lease next year, can that affect the value for 2005 to 2007?
come on, next, in 014?
Yes.
No.
And
That's
that's because-
that's 5 years later.
Right, that's because the lease is signed and they moved in after 2007, isn't that correct?
They moved in 5 years later.
But that's why you can't add that to the value for the period 2005 to 2007.
You 5 years later is different than 6 months or a year later.
Not if the valuation period is 2005 to 2007, is it?
Well, again, I was corrected at the deposition that they moved in January of 08.
Let me ask you to go back. We were asking some foundation questions about the construction loan agreement itself. I'm going to ask you to assume that it was a 2-year loan commitment, that it was for 4 buildings, 6 foundations, or prep work, but 4 buildings. I'm going to ask you to take a look at this Exhibit 4, and I'll walk you through some of the issues.
Which book?
The black book.
Your Honor, I'm going to renew my objection to the construction loan agreement.
Let me direct your attention to paragraph 5.2, entitled Project. Would you read that paragraph?
The word project as used in this agreement means the construction and completion of development and infrastructure improvements on the real estate for the first phase of planned unit development consisting of 6 commercial sites located along Broadway Avenue and 113th Avenue, Crown Point, Indiana 46307. And the vertical construction of 4 2-story buildings with the first story as retail space and the second story as office space, and all improvements contemplated by this agreement, including without limitation the erection of the building or structures on the real property identified in writing by borrowers to lender, and all other work necessary to make the project unusable and complete for the intended purpose.
All right. Would you agree with me that the scope of this project is the infrastructure on 6 buildings, but the actual vertical construction of 4?
Your Honor, I renew my objection.
Overruled.
Would you agree with me?
Please, the question again.
Would you agree with me that the scope of this project, per the construction loan document, is the infrastructure for 6 buildings and the actual vertical construction of 4 buildings?
The way it's written, I would say so. That means that's what it says.
Okay.
Asking what it says.
All right. So, if you were asked to assume that in your analysis,
Can I say one thing?
sure.
I was taught a long time ago, never to assume anything. You know what it says. You make an ASS out of human beings.
Well,
I don't want to assume anything.
but in fact, you did assume things that council asked you to assume, and one of the things they asked you to assume was that the project was 9 buildings. Isn't that correct?
They said the project was to be 9 buildings.
All right. Now, I've just asked you, I've shown you the definition of the project that's in the construction loan document, and it's infrastructure for 6 buildings and actual construction of 4. Isn't that right?
That's what it says in the print here.
And if that were the project that you were asked to assume in your damages analysis, you would not have multiplied the number on the board, 2,997,400, by 9, would you?
I think in my deposition I said if it's 4, multiply it by 4.
Okay, thank you. Now let's also look back at that 5.2 for a second, because there's 2 terms that are used in here. First, first story as retail space and second story as office space. Do you see that reference?
No, we're,
5.2,
oh, 5.2?
fourth line.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Okay, so we have office and retail. Does it say anything about residential?
No.
And in fact, in your analysis, you assumed it was office and retail, isn't that right?
Well, I read, there was leases that, I think 2 of them, if I remember right, were going to be residential.
Well, but in your testimony, you valued it as office and retail, isn't that correct?
I valued it on income.
Oh, it didn't matter whether it was retail, office, residential, industrial, commercial?
No, that, it's, again, the leases that were supplied to me were what they were.
Do you recall the discussion about residential being valued differently in terms of a capitalization rate than commercial and retail?
Yes.
All right. And which capitalization rate did you apply? Residential or commercial?
I went straight to the, I kept the commercial capitalization rate, because these were also possibly, the building was going to be turned, I don't know if the whole building, but at least a couple of units into condos eventually.
And if that happened, that would change your valuation of the building for the owner, wouldn't it?
Well, he would have gotten paid for those units,
And it would have fixed the value.
which means he would have less space to rent, and therefore the other income would still be on a capitalization rate. But he would have, and the loan, I'm sure there's something, I shouldn't assume, but I would think there's something in here that if he sells something off, he has to pay down extra portion of the mortgage.
Let me direct your attention to page 38 of your deposition, lines 19 to 22. Let me know when you're there.
Yes.
Question. What did you use for the rental rates that you utilized to do your analysis? Answer. I used the first floor as commercial and I used the second floor for offices. You see that testimony?
Mm-hmm.
And that question was asked and answered in your deposition?
Yeah.
And were you telling the truth?
That's how I analyzed it?
Yes.
That's how I analyzed it, as rental income.
And you're right. And we'll look at that. There were a couple of residential leases. And there were a couple of vacants. But you valued it as if it were commercial and retail. Office and commercial. Isn't that right?
That's what it says, yes.
Okay. Go back to your general ledger. And I'd like you to identify any rents that were paid by Plank on his residential lease. I'll help you out by directing you to, again, the last payment, which was October 23rd, 07.
Where am I supposed to be looking at?
The Exhibit 33, please, in the red book.
No, okay. We're at, sorry, where?
October 23rd, 2007.
Okay.
You see a rent deposit there of $835?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say which Plank that is, does it?
No, just this point.
Right. Let's assume, for the moment, that is Richard M. Plank, the owner of City Center Complex, the owner of City Center. Work backward to 2005 and see if you can find any other rent payments for Richard Plank. during the 2005 to 2007 time frame. And I will tell you that I couldn't find it. See if you can.
Not seeing.
All right, so looking now at tab 2, the report that was attached to your deposition, you included the plank lease for a total rent of $12,024 per year. Is that right?
Yes.
And we just looked, and you only paid $835 for 3 years total. 05, 06, and 07, you paid $835. You would agree with me, wouldn't you, that that's substantially less than $12,024?
Yes.
So the leases, the lease numbers that went into your top line foundation for this whole analysis for the period 2005 to 2007 are wrong in a major way for Z-Grill and Plank. Isn't that true?
I'm going to say again, I was given the leases, I wasn't given exhibits like this or anything. I made a valuation on if the leases were in effect and the rent was being collected. Okay?
That's fair.
So,
Counsel?
so what's here has nothing to make my thing invalid, in that if that started whenever, it's when it was full. I don't know, I can't determine why rent wasn't received or when it was received, okay, starting then. So I didn't base it on, I'll do this opinion. I said, give me the leases, and I'll do that. Okay, but what else is behind the scenes, I don't have.
Well, we're going to keep going, but just so that I'm clear, you had Z-Grill in there for $49,485, and you had Plank in there for $12,024. You add those two together, and you get something over $60,000. And the total rent that came in from those two tenants for 3 years was $835. Would you agree with me?
And those figures?
Yes.
Well, that's what the book says.
Well, it's their ledger. According to their ledger, that's all the rent they got from those two tenants for 3 years.
I'm looking at the same stuff, yes.
Let's look at lease number 8 for a minute. It's Exhibit 71.
Red book?
Yes, correct. Have you seen this document before?
Looks familiar.
Okay. And that is the lease number 8 that you were capturing on your exhibit here. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, who signed the lease on behalf of City Center Complex?
Looks like Joanne Plank, manager.
Okay, now if I ask you to assume that Johanna Plank had no title with City Center, would that change whether you would include this lease in your analysis?
I see a lot of leases.
I'm just asking if you knew that.
Objection, Your Honor, the witness was trying to answer. He was interrupted.
I see a lot of leases, and it's signed Agent 4, it's signed 10 different ways, let's say, maybe not 10, but 5 different ways. So I don't know what her responsibility is or isn't,
Are you finished?
because it's a plank, so she could own shares in the company, I don't know.
If I told you that in her deposition, and when she was on the stand here, and her deposition was read to her, she told the court and the jury that she didn't think her signature on a City Center lease was binding. If you accept that as true, would you take her lease numbers out of the calculation?
If again, first I'll make one statement. I was given all these leases as being true, factual, and okay.
Believe me, I sympathize. You were told to assume these were valid leases, but if they're not, that's my question, if they're not valid leases, would you take them out of the rent calculation?
Are they valid or are they paying leases?
We'll get to that in a minute, but Johanna Plank said that she had no authority, she had no position with City Complex, and that the documents that were signed by her were not enforceable. If that were true, just assume it's true for a minute, would that affect her year calculation?
I have a building for rent, and the person that signed the lease left. His partner who didn't sign the lease stayed and has been there for 8 years, maybe with an invalid lease, but he's paying rent. So I would take that income into value.
All right, well, let's look at back at the lease for a moment. Is this a triple net lease like you were describing on your direct testimony?
I said there were some leases that weren't triple net, and I have its combined rent, and then as far as CAM, and at least in my lease, I don't know if it's in this one, it's at $275 a month for taxes.
But this lease is not a triple net lease, is it?
This would be what I call double net.
Double net. Okay. Did you, in your number, take out 4% or some other number for the fact that it's double net instead of triple?
Again, I took out as we call it, a broad stroke of 4% on all the leases.
That takes care of everything. Sorry.
That was what I said, I think, in the deposition, and maybe not, is that the figures will be what the figures are, but this is what I took out.
All right, I'm going to try to speed up the analysis of the general ledger. There were 4 rent payments that I was able to find for Jive Betty. And if you want to write these down, that's fine. If you want me to just repeat them as you find them, that's going to.
I'm back. I might put book in my ear.
Well, no, this is the ledger. The Exhibit 33 in the red book is what I'm asking you to go through.
I'll just go to 33.
In the 3 years, from 05 to 07, there were 4 rent payments by Jive Betty. One was on July 3rd, 2007, in the amount of $1,655.91. Next was on May 16, 2007, $470.58. The third one was June 15, 07, and that's $1,283.33. And the last one was August 8, 2007, also $1,283.33. If my math is correct, that adds up to $4,693.15, all in 2007, 0 in 2006, 0 in 2005. And I'd invite you to look through that. In fact, I'm going to ask you to look through that exhibit and see if you find any Jive Betty rent payments that I missed. Excuse me, Mr. Larson, counsel has correctly pointed out, that is the court's copy. I mean, we would appreciate it if you wouldn't write on the...
I'm writing on this.
Oh, that's fine.
7-3 was one.
July 307, May 1607.
I've got the rest.
Yeah.
That's it. At least what I could see quickly.
All right. So Jive Betty, all the rent payments that we were able to find for a 3-year period adds up to a total of $4,693.15. What was the amount that you plugged in on Exhibit 2 to your report for her rent payments?
For the year?
Yes.
15.4.
More than 3 times the amount that she paid in 3 years. Isn't that right? All right. Now let's turn to Mr. Santa Catarina. It's lease number.
But that just looks like that we started in 06, so June of 06. Jive Betty.
Well,
It's so different saying what you're talking about. It's not 3 years, so
right.
it's still a big difference.
It's a big difference. Tony Santa Catarina, lease number 5. Now that's exhibit number 69 in the black book.
Black book?
No, I said the red book. Is this one of the documents that you reviewed in preparing your calculations?
Seems familiar.
Okay. Now, what's the date on that lease?
June 1st. Looks like it started in October. September 1st, most of it.
The lease term began in September of '06.
Right.
Do you have any explanation why there wouldn't be a payment prior to March 1507?
Not, again, I wasn't looking for explanations. You know,
Okay, I understand that you were just looking at the leases and assuming that they paid as per the lease. If they didn't pay as per the lease, as none of these that we've looked at have paid per the lease, is it fair to include the full value of the lease in your capitalization analysis?
if I had all the circumstances that happened, why it happened. Okay, because, again, I hate to go to myself. I gave someone that asked for 3 months free rent, I gave him 6 months free rent. So it would show no payments for 6 months. This was a lease I did for my building. So I don't know why they didn't pay, if there was any special, you know, I want you to be successful, I'm going to give you a year's free rent. I don't know.
Well, I understand that you would work with somebody if you want them to be successful, and you might not charge them all the rent that they're obligated to pay. But in terms of valuing the property on a capitalized lease basis, don't you have to back out the periods of free rent?
But if I get a loan and the bank says, but you can get rent, and then I give this person 6 months free rent, I don't go back to the bank and say, hey, you better redo my loan. I give the guy 6 months free rent. On I know this person was there for 7 years, after that. So, I mean, if I was evaluating on records, there's a different story. I'm evaluating on that these people were there, going to be there, and gave a value on that. What happens because of the economy? What happens maybe bank calls? I mean, I don't know. There's so many circumstances that my assignment wasn't to do that. My assignment was people are moving in or moved in, and here's the rents.
If we looked at your testimony earlier from your deposition, where if there was a 20% vacancy rate and you didn't disclose it to a buyer, it would be lying. You recall that?
But I said that, yeah. I also said regarding rents that if a person is selling a building, and I'm not talking about a whole vacant building, but 1 or 2 units, and they're vacant, that investor, when he sells it, will sign a brand new 2-year lease to the buyer so that he has a full building.
But here we are in 2013. And your valuation for the 3-year period 05, 06, and 07 has included $49,485 of calculated rent per year. That's $150,000 in rent from Z Grill, and they paid 0. And then we can go across all the other ones that we've looked at. They are paying way less for a 3-year period than you've included for a 1-year period. Wouldn't you say that overstates the value of the property?
if I was doing an appraisal to verify our income, it would change value. But what I'm saying is, my value was based on the leases.
Because that's what they asked you to do.
They gave me the leases and said, give an opinion of value.
Before we leave Tony Santa Caterina, first question is this a triple net lease? That is Exhibit 69, Red Book.
No, double net.
Double net, okay. Also on Tony Santa Caterina, the first rent payment that I see is in March 1507. This is on your Exhibit 33 from the Red Book. I have one March 1507, April 907, May 207, July 1007, June 1507, and August 1407. So I have 6 rent payments, all in 07. Each one is $835. If you multiply if my math is correct, multiplying 835 by 6, you get $5,010 in rent. And now I'm going to ask you to go through that exhibit like we did before and see if you can find any rent payments that I missed.
It was at 38.
33.
That's it.
Okay, and you would agree with me, wouldn't you, that $5,010 is substantially less than the $14,892 that you used as the annual rent for the Santa Caterina lease? $5,010 for the entire 3-year period versus $14,892 for 1 year.
Again, I think it's, since whatever the date of lease, I think it's 3 years, but it's substantial.
No, I understand. But your valuation was for 2005, 2006, 2007. Let's look at the lease number 7, the Lori Donaldson keepsakes. Now, the lease for keepsakes is number 96 in the red binder. Have you seen this lease before?
Who's mayor?
First, let me ask you, is this a triple net lease?
No.
What is it?
Government.
Okay. Let me ask you to take a look at the top paragraph on the second page, tenant. How do the approximate cam charges fit with your allowance for cam charges? The handwritten insertion.
I see it. No. I looked at those as being high, as at least those that you'll pay the real estate taxes.
You're saying it doesn't matter that they hand wrote in a different number?
Well, that's between the two parties.
Right, but in terms of your calculations, did you factor in the cam charges that she's paying there?
I used the cam charges she's paying, yes.
Can you show me where?
I mean, it's on this sheet here, number. I may have misunderstood. Am I saying I put them on the list here as cam charges?
It says combined.
Combined. I'm sorry. I put probably the tax rate. I have it combined with the rent. I have the real estate tax figure, and I have the CAM combined with the rent.
Well, I see the real estate number, but you said that you had the handwritten changes on CAM in your sheet, and it looks like they just get blended into the rent.
Correct.
Okay, I did read that correctly. Thank you. I'm going to try to speed this up again and say for keepsakes, I find a total of $4,318.50 in rent. And those rent payments are on January 11, 07, $1,300. February 14, 07, $1,300. March 6, 07, $1,300. 4/11/07, $2,173.75. May 11/07, $1,300. June 13/07, $1,300. July 11/07, $2,145.25. And then finally, August 10, of 07, $1,300. It adds up, if my math is correct, $4,318.50. And again, I'm going to ask you to look through and see if you can identify any rent payments I missed.
How much was the total rent?
Oh, it is, excuse me, my math is wrong. What does your calculator say?
I didn't add it up.
All right.
I can if you want to give me the figures up.
Well, I'll tell you what, if Your Honor, if I may approach, let me borrow the calculator back while he looks for any additional rent payments.
No problem.
If I may approach again.
Yes, you may.
You're right, there was an error there. The amount was up to $12,119. But I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss a rent payment. Can you just run through quickly and see if I missed any?
No.
Okay, so that adds up to the $12,119, and we're getting closer, but that's still below the $15,000 on your exhibit, isn't that correct?
That could almost fall under 2 months free rent.
Well, we're getting closer. Before we leave that lease, would you look at the last page of the lease and tell me who signed it on behalf of City Center?
I'm sorry, which number is that again?
It's number 96. Joanna Plank, same signature as we saw on the Jive Betty, and she's testified that that's not binding. Does that affect your use of these numbers and the valuation of the property?
Again, I'm going to kind of forget the exact answer, but if they're paying rent, it could be a not legal document, but they're paying rent.
Until they find out that it's not legal.
Well, the person that would normally find out would be the landlord when he wants to go through the lease and say, I got sued.
Okay?
I don't think the tenant would
don't want to take the court's time and the jury's time to go through the last four. They are the biggest of the tenants in some ways. Obviously, Z-Grill was the biggest, well, it was a big one, but they paid zero. In terms of who paid how much rent, I'm going to just ask you to assume this for the moment. Assume that Cold Stone paid beginning in August of 06 all the way through August 30 of 07 a total of $33,046 in rent. And we can come back and verify that, or council can take you through it on redirected. It's important.
And that's for Cold Stone?
That's for Cold Stone. And again, that's August of 06 through August 30, 07. $33,046. 2 cents. All right? Now that exceeds the amount of the annual rent, but that was split between 06 and 07. Would you agree with me?
Well, without calculating it all, but is that, and I don't know, the lease, was there some build-out time, or?
Well, you're reading my mind. Let's go to Exhibit 33 and see if there were any build-out payments made by City Center for Cold Stone.
Well, I have a note here, $10 per square foot. Is that?
Well, let me see if I can help you through this. July 11/06. There's a payment by City Center of $5,000 for Cold Stone partial build-out. You see that on Exhibit 33?
On here?
Yes, on the general list. July 11/06. $5,000 payment for partial build-out.
How much was it for?
It's $5,000. It's going to be in the
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Yeah. 5,000 Cold Stone partial build-out. Okay. Now drop down a half a dozen lines or so. August 4/06. Cold Stone build-out part, $5,110. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, look at December 12/06. You see there's a Cold Stone build-out final, $8,199.25. So we've seen a total of more than $18,000 in build-out costs. Isn't that right?
That's what those total, yeah.
In your valuation, don't you need to subtract out the build-out payments that City Center is paying from the gross rent?
No.
And why is that?
Because build-outs are always given out. It's nothing to do with rent. That's
Well,
the cost of building the building, and when you go in for a loan, I can tell you national companies, or even if they're a local franchisee, they get build-out money.
I'm not disputing whether they get it. I'm just talking about the accounting. You're saying that you're going to take out 4% for the CAM costs, 0 for vacancy rates, and then you've got rent that's coming in, which, if my numbers are right, and we've already shown that I'm not always right, rent coming in of $33,046, but to get the net operating income for that lease, is your testimony that you do not have to consider the cost of the build-out at all?
No, not at all.
What if I told you that Exhibit 4, the construction loan, provided for the delivery of vanilla boxes. You know, have you heard the term vanilla box?
I've been around, yes.
Okay. What is a vanilla box?
4 walls, usually 1 or 2 bathrooms, and sometimes a floor, sometimes not a floor, sometimes a drop ceiling, sometimes not a drop ceiling.
Okay. Now, the build-up is something that's unique for this tenant, isn't that right?
It's for, yeah, what that tenant's use, yeah.
And the build-up doesn't add any value for a tenant that doesn't need that build-up. Is that right?
Depends who your next tenant is.
All right. We don't know who that's going to
We
be.
don't know that, right?
All right. But it's your testimony that you do not need to net out the operating income.
No.
You said that you haven't testified. Has counsel instructed you on the Indiana law about what needs to be taken into account in a lease capitalization?
I'm not an accountant, so.
Okay, so you don't know if the law requires you to net out those costs.
I'm not an accountant, I don't.
Okay, let's move on to Anytime Fitness. I believe that is the biggest number you plugged in, $69,930 per year. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. From September of 06 to September of 07, it looks like, if my numbers are right, 13 months of rent they paid, and the total is $68,031.16, and exactly 13 exactly the same payments of $6,831.16. So that's
Go from what dates to what dates?
well, it's 13 months from September of 06 through September of 07. So we're getting close. That is not quite the 69.30 for 12 months, but it's the closest we've seen so far. Would you agree with me?
Yes.
And then finally, let's look at, I think we've covered all of them except Wayne Brum. Now, Wayne Brum was the strategic financial group, 94, Exhibit 94 in the black binder.
Black binder?
Yeah. I'm sorry, red binder.
Oh, that's right. Good.
Okay, have you seen that lease?
Looks familiar.
Is this a triple net lease?
This is for Wayne.
Yeah.
That's the way I read it, yeah.
It's triple net?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me ask you to look at Exhibit 33, the ledger, general ledger. And let me direct your attention to March 5, 07. a deposit, rent deposit of $4,623.38. Next one, April 30, 07, $3,500. The next one, July 3rd, 07, $3,500. The next one, June 15, 07, $3,500. And then the last one is August 1, 07, $3,500. And if my math is correct, that adds up to $18,623.38. Please just look through Exhibit 33 and let me know if you think I missed anything.
Did you give me a 4-2?
Of what year?
07?
Oh, no, I have 4/30/07. Is there another one in April?
I have a 4-2.
Okay, good. Good. I'm glad you got the $3,500.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Adding that to the 18,006 takes us to essentially 22,000. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. 22,000. Let's plug that in on the spreadsheet. Now, can you tell me which of those 8 leases are first floor leases and which are second floor leases?
Again, I don't have my notes, but Cold Stone is, I know Z-Grill, Anytime Fitness.
Those are the only 3 on the first floor?
That, I remember, I'm not saying I'm 100% correct on it.
And then all the others will be on the second floor.
If I'm correct on the first floor, yes.
The numbers that we just went through for all of the tenants on the 8 leases, adding in the $3,500 that you found for Wayne Brown that I didn't have, the total for 3 years is $158,831.13. You agree with me?
If you add them up, I trust you.
Okay. For 3 years, it's a lot less than you have for 1 year, for the 8 leases that you looked at. Isn't that right?
Some of them are 1 year, some are 1.5 years, and some are 3 years.
Well, your valuation is for the period of 05 to 07, isn't that right?
I got to get across again that I'm going from the leases that were here. You're going on 3 years. Some of those leases didn't start from the third year back.
Well, I didn't average it. I'm saying you take all of the rents that are collected for 3 years, and you're still short of your 1 year number.
Again, I wasn't supplied with any bookkeeping, any tax returns, or anything. I was just says take the leases, evaluate the building, and that's what I did.
Regardless of whether the leases were enforceable or whether they were paying the rents that were stated in the leases or any other factor. You just took the leases and accepted them. Isn't that right?
I took the leases that stated what the income was and used that for my valuation.
Right now, you didn't do any discount to net present value, did you?
No.
And you're talking about valuations that can run out to 15 years out. Isn't that right?
Well, there's leases here that if you wanted to value, some had increases from year 1 at 3%. Some had increases from year 6 at 3%. So you could literally appraise it if they were on effect and paying. You could evaluate it, opinion value higher every year.
Did any of the leases extend 15 years that you looked at?
Nope.
So what did you do when the lease expired? Did you just assume it continued, or did you make an adjustment now that you may have a potential vacancy?
Nope, no adjustments.
No adjustments. You just added all of the rents as if the leases stay in effect the entire 15-year period.
There's no 16.
I don't know what 15-year period. This is the value of the 5
What I will say is that, let's say they were all rented and something comes vacant, as a owner of property, first of all, you usually know 90 days in advance. You start advertising it, so you hope you don't miss any rent. But you may miss 1 or 2. You might have to give that person time to remodel, but can't use anything that's in there.
You did a second valuation. We've been talking exclusively about the 05 to 07 valuation, but you did a second valuation for 2012. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And is that the second column on your exhibit?
Yeah.
Why did the value go down for 2012?
I used a half a point half a point more on the cap rate, and I used current rents of comparable properties. And more properties now are not triple net leases, and more properties, if they still are triple net leases, have reduced $3-4 a square foot rents.
So just so I'm clear, you did not assume that the terms of the rents of the leases would stay the same for 2012 as you looked at on the same 8 leases for 2005 to 2007?
No, I'm looking at if he had gone through, and let's say building 9, building 8, building 7, whatever, the current rents that he missed by not building those buildings. Okay, and we started up again because of, if you know the area, you know that the area is filled up with different commercial properties that had he gone through with the buildings could have been his tenants. That we'll never know.
Well, that's speculation, isn't it?
Right, but they would have went to some building.
But the one that we looked at, the 8 years of leases that we looked at from 05 to 07, we know had higher vacancies and lower rents that are built into your analysis of that period. Isn't that right?
Say that again.
The 8 leases that we looked at for 05 to 07 valuation had lower rents, and higher vacancies than you built into your model. Isn't that right?
Or you're going away from the premise of how I was given this assignment.
It's a yes or no question. I mean, I don't know, the premise is what it is, but I'm just asking, isn't it true? We looked at the valuation for 05 to 07. The rents that came in were less than the ones that you used, and there was a higher vacancy. 2 vacant units on the second floor, isn't that right?
That's the fact you're throwing out.
We
And I didn't deny it. I mean, that's what you threw out.
You told me there were 2 vacant units on the second floor. I didn't go up with that. And you walked through the numbers with me. The rents are lower than you plugged into your model. Isn't that true? Yes or no?
The rents, no, they're not. No.
100 and, what did we say,
I mean,
158,000?
what they collected in rent is one thing, but the rents are in the leases.
Well, what drives the value? Isn't the actual collections important to the value?
Again, when you sell something, again, I wasn't given any documentation. This ledger, I don't have any of that.
I understand and I'm sympathetic.
So I can only go by the information given me.
Right.
I.e., the appraiser for the bank, when the building wasn't even under construction, came up with very similar values.
They had trouble leasing, didn't they?
I didn't lease it for them. I don't know.
Well, you knew, we looked at, the project was commercial and retail.
Yeah, I think I could just say, okay, but what I'm saying is I don't know any of the facts that the bank and Mr. Point had that helped or hurt whatever he was trying to do. I have no facts on that.
Okay.
So I can only talk about what's in the lease.
Assume for a moment that it was 4 buildings. The loan was for 2 years. And there was no residential allowed under the loan. We looked at the definition of project. That would all change your numbers, wouldn't it? If you had that information when you did your study.
Say that one more time, please.
If they had given you information that the project was to build 4 buildings, not 9, that the project was commercial and office, not residential, and that the rents came in over a 3-year period of $158,000 instead of the stated amounts on the lease, that would have changed your analysis, wouldn't it?
Those are facts. My analysis is based on the facts I was given. Now you're giving me new facts,
Yes.
and that's a total different evaluation.
Thank you. That was my question. It's a different evaluation. The true facts are different than the assumptions that you were given.
Same with the appraiser for the bank.
That's true.
I mean, he gave the bank his opinion.
Now,
It's higher, I think, than mine.
Now, your broker's opinion of value, the tab 3. You see them?
No,
Did you grab these? Did you prepare these?
I didn't type them, but I handwrote them.
You handwrote them. Okay. Explain to me what you meant on D, condition comments.
Want me to read it first?
Either way, if you want to read it, that's fine, but if you want to just describe what you meant, that's
Well, I'll read it. Had this development been completed, it would have been a first-class retail office development and a showcase development for Crown Point. With only one building fully completed, the development has taken on a distressed personality and will have this description attached to it for a long period of time. I'm sure, let me explain it?
Sure.
I'm sure when this development was, and I wasn't there, was presented to Crown Point, I'm sure that there was comments that this would be a great development, a showcase development, a generator for that area to get Broadway going. And now that it did go through, it has been a, whatever the word I use there, it's a distressed property, and it probably hurt development on Broadway for a while.
Okay. Now, what did you mean when you said retail office? First-class retail office development.
Just the way, I mean, there's a picture that looks like first-class retail office.
But only retail office.
I think we covered that they put two that were going to be residential.
And that violated their construction law. We looked at the scope of the project. If you would assume with me that that violated the construction law, this distressed property or the description attached to it for a long time could be because they didn't comply with their loan documents, couldn't it?
Objection, Your Honor. This goes well beyond the scope of his opinions.
Well, no, it doesn't. It's actually to the heart of his opinion.
Could be beyond sustained.
He's an expert offering an opinion that doesn't stand up based on the numbers.
It's also speculative. It could be anything.
Sustained.
All right, look at D on the second page of the broker opinion value. Isn't it true that the real estate bubble that started at the end of 2007 and really took effect in a drastic way by 2009 really slowed the development on this project? Would you agree?
But, Your Honor, that's only a partial statement. This project is...
Read the full statement.
The market for this type of property when the project was started was excellent because of the expansion of the area and other projects like the Purdue Research Park. The only thing that slowed the expansion was due to the real estate bubble that started at the end of 2007 and really took effect in a drastic way by 2009.
And then really one last area of questioning, E, normal marketing days. I'm not sure why that is normal marketing days heading, but read that paragraph, and my question is, isn't it true that it's common to have a pre-construction lease requirement? Your number is 40 to 70%. So you just read that again.
Okay. The market for this type of property when the project was started was excellent because of the expansion of the area and other projects like the Purdue Research Park. The only thing that slowed the expansion, for the years 2004 to 2007, projects in a good growth area were either being developed for a customer wanting a build-to-suit project or started with a 40% to 70% pre-construction lease or letters of intent.
That's common, isn't it? The pre-construction leasing requirements.
It's common, and people did do spec buildings, literally, but it's the majority, which is over 50%, could be 60%, could be 70%, wanted some letters of intent or leases signed. But during the heyday, you could get a loan strictly on a spec building if you wanted.
All right, but if you look at Exhibit 4 in the black book again, I'm going to direct your attention to paragraphs 1.3E and 1.3F. Black book,
Yeah.
Exhibit 4.
Okay.
1.3E and 1.3F. the third required a percentage of pre-leasing even higher than what you had in your report, isn't that right? Let me try to interpret the cumulative effect of those two.
That's 50%, and I thought I said 40 to 70%.
For each building, they had to have 50% pre-leased before they could start construction. Then they had to have 75% leased after it was completed before they could start on the next building, and they had to have 50% pre-leased in the next building. Do you agree with that?
That's what I believe it says.
Okay. And if you look at E, %50 of the lease portion agreement, as part of the 50% leasing, at least 25% had to be in office. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
No further questions?
How do you think you're going to take?
10 minutes.
All right.
Mr. Russell, first off, we did have a typo. This was $2,947,450, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Are the rest of the numbers correct?
Someone might have taken that back from me.
You lose your notes.
Right. Some people have taken stuff from me. I think it was the fourth sheet. Oh, yeah, okay.
Let me change that. The
This was correct.
$226,365 is correct. Is that right? An evaluation of $2,829,562 per building is correct.
That's before. Yeah.
And the total, $25,466,058 is correct. That's what I have. Yeah, I've opened your black book. If we could turn just quickly to tab 2, please. That's the credit commitment of October 11, 2005. Isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Could you turn to the third page, please?
Okay.
Under transaction summary and history. Midway down the page.
Mm-hmm.
Could you read the second full paragraph, please?
It says the project will eventually.
Yes.
Okay. The project will eventually consist of a total of 9 buildings through 3 phases of development. Site work on the entire property and construction of the first 4 buildings will be completed into Phase 1. Buildings 5 and 6 will be completed in Phase 2, but the final 3 buildings are completed in Phase 3. Separate construction facilities will be underwritten for Phase 2 and Phase 3 in the future.
So the entire city project is going to consist of these 9 buildings
Yes.
that are shown in the site drawing?
Yes.
And obviously that never happened.
Right.
But is that what you were tasked to come up with a value for?
Yes.
And you know why that didn't happen? Did anybody ask you to look at why it didn't happen? In other words, were you going to assess whether it's the bank's fault or Plank's fault or City Center's fault? Was that part of your assignment?
Not to assess whose fault it was, but
Specifically, what's the value it would have been if it had been completed? And if it had been completed back in the 05 to 07 time frame.
right.
Now, you were asked for a very long time about what were the actual rents that were collected in the 05 to 07 time frame.
Yes.
Is that what your opinion is based on, what's collected in that time, or is it what the building will collect over the life of the building?
What the building would collect.
In other words, if there's new construction ongoing, there's some concrete blocks that are in the ground, and it's just coming up out of the ground, you can project what the rents will be,
Yes.
and based upon what you project the rents will be, you can determine the value.
Yes.
So if I bought a building from you for $2,829,562, I would expect to collect rents of $226,000 per year,
Yes.
and that's over the life of the building.
Or more, basically.
But we're talking for 20, 30 years.
Yes.
Now, could you go to page 7 of this? Do you see at the top, operating analysis?
Yes.
Did the bank do the same sort of calculation that you did?
Pretty simple, yes.
And did they assume $302,000 in rents? And the total column at the top?
Yes.
And that was the gross rents, and they took off for the maintenance and taxes and what have you, vacancies.
Yes.
And they got $258,668,
Yes.
which compares to your $235,796.
Yes.
So was your evaluation actually more conservative than theirs?
Yes.
So when you're valuing for this 2005 to 2007 timeframe, that's what somebody would have bought the buildings for in that timeframe. They would have bought it in 05, 06, or 07 for that number, $2,829,562.
Yes.
That's not the amount of rents that's collected in that time because the building's not completed yet, right?
Right.
Now, did you actually look at what the rents were in this general vicinity?
Yes.
And did you make notes on that?
Yes.
Were there facilities rented just a block away at 113th and Broadway?
Yes.
And what were the rental rates at that facility?
$16 to $19 a square foot.
$16 to $19 a square foot. Were there rental spaces over by the Striking Venice Hills on Broadway?
Yes.
And what were those rentals?
$21 a square foot.
And there's rentals that are over by Midline, where's that?
I have to get a map, but that's within probably a mile and a half of the area.
And what were those rentals?
$19 to $21 a square foot.
So you look at the comparable rentals were about a mile of this area?
They were higher than the rentals that these leases were at.
And if this 9-building project had been finished, do you think the rents could have been higher here too?
Well, it's like how we rated to a home subdivision of, say, 200 homes. The first homes get sold a little bit lower, and then as the demand goes, they keep going up, and then the last 5% of the homes, again, get a little bit lower to sell out all the homes. Commercial is the same thing. You get the first tenants in, and things get going, you can start raising rents.
And here in reality, what actually came to pass, in one building that got completed and 8 others that didn't. That's what City Center came to be, right?
Right.
But nevertheless, you have signed leases for Cold Stone, Z-Grill, Anytime Fitness, Waiting Brum, Tony Santa Carolina, Rich Plank, Keepsakes, and Jive Betty for that one building.
Yes.
And did those leases range from $12 to $15 a foot?
Yes.
And did you use those numbers?
Yes.
Were those numbers more conservative than what you were seeing in the market for other complexes that were completed?
Yes.
But you used the conservative numbers.
I used what I saw, yes.
And if this complex had been completed like these others and within a mile, do you think the rents could have been higher or should have been even a higher valuation?
They could have been higher.
Now, last thing I want to touch upon, you talked about or you were asked about the appraisal that was done by the bank's appraiser. Do you recall that? You were asked about snippets of his assumptions of vacancies and what have you.
Yes.
That you assumed 100% of the leases that were actually in place when you valued the building too, didn't you?
Yes,
But there were also vacancies there,
right,
and you didn't add any rent for those vacancies.
no,
So you took it as is with 2 vacant spots.
right,
And you didn't calculate a percentage for that, did you?
no, that covered it really.
Could you turn to tab 38 in the white binder? And look at page 1400. Now, I believe you just testified that you used comparables within about a mile or a mile and a half of this complex. Could you tell the jury where were the comps that the bank's appraiser used?
One was on Cicero Avenue in Oak Lawn, Illinois. One was on LaGrange, South LaGrange Road in Orland Park, Illinois. One was on Balmer Road in Olympia Fields, Illinois. One was on Town Center Road in Matson, Illinois. And one is on North LaGrange Road in Frankfort, Illinois.
And that's on tab 38, page 1400?
Objection, Your Honor. Page 1400 is sales. The witness testified he did not do a comparative sales analysis. He did a lease capitalization analysis. And on page 19 of his deposition, he clearly said he did not do any opinions other than the 2 lease capitalization analyses that he outlined. He did it.
Well, we're talking about using comps for rents and sales.
He testified to during your testimony, during your examination that the bank used comps from outside this area.
But as an expert providing a valuation of this property, he already testified he did not do a comparative sales analysis.
That's the question.
I was asking about the comps and where you use them from.
Overruled.
And you use comps within about a mile of this property.
Yes.
Would comps in Oak Lawn, Orland Park, Olympia Fields, Madison, and Frankfort be good comps for a property in Crown Point?
I don't believe so.
Why not?
Because, I mean, even those areas within the, first of all, they're too far away. And second of all, you've got at least 2 different makeups of population just in those areas.
In other words, these wouldn't be centers where someone would move to if they're looking in Crown Point. Now, you didn't use a sales comparison approach, but did you look at sales comps as part of your notes?
Well, I looked at the cap rates.
Did you find sales in Maryville and Sherville and Maryville?
Yes. And it took the sale price to the cap rate.
But there are sales that are in this community. You don't have to go to Matson or Orland Park or Oak Lawn.
Objection, Your Honor. The witness is amending his expert report on the stand.
He's not amending his, he's used the comps he used. I'm simply asking him about it. You wouldn't use those kind of comps for this project, would you? No. And again, this is the value, $25,466,000 if city center would have been completed.
Yes.
No further questions.
Or you have a redirect. Do you have a redirect?
No questions, Your Honor.
Before the jury uses questions, I need to take 5 minutes. Okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, Joe.